Hello and welcome to a Sunny Book Nook. My name is Sunny and I want to wish you a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year if you're watching this around this time of year. Today I am going to be giving you my favorites of 2022, favorite books, favorite reads of the year. I'm really excited to share this list with you. I don't own most of the books that I read, to be honest, but most of these books I do have physical copies of, yay! But I'm thinking about doing a nonfiction version of this video because these are all fiction books, and I did read a fair amount of nonfiction that I really enjoyed this past year, so let me know if you would like to see that video. It's just that I'm still trying to get a hold of some physical copies, and also some of the copies that I do have are in circulation among my friends. I let people borrow my books. I'm a good friend. But anyways, let's just get into my list. I'm gonna first go through the honorary mentions portion of this video before getting into like my favorites, but I'm not going in any particular order because it's already hard enough for me to narrow down among the 200 plus books that I read this past year so far, my favorites, like a top 10 list, because this isn't even like a top 10, much less rank them. I don't even know how people do it because it's just like books are so different and I like different things from different books, and how do you even compare genres because these are all across different genres and different types of stories and narratives. It's hard for me, okay? As a book lover, it's difficult. So, anyways, let's just get into it. I am going to start off with this honorary mention that I read sort of early. No, I read in the summer of this past year. That was Siren Queen by Nevo. This book I have talked about on this channel a little bit this past year, so if you've been around, I think you've heard me yabber on about this one. But I really enjoyed this 20th century noir, golden age of Hollywood type Hays Code, queer women in Hollywood, Asian American cinema vibes of this with like the magical realism infused into the storytelling, because I've read Nevo's other like books before, but this was the first book that I've read from this author that really resonated with me and really struck a chord within me. It very much has a ethereal and whimsical but dark vibe to it that has that dark, twisted fairy tale of getting entrapped into this mechanism and Hollywood system of exploitation and being an actor and wanting to tell stories and being an Asian woman and being I think this main character is a Chinese lesbian, and her experiences with like the wolf who is like a producer, and it's just very interesting the way that like body horror and magic is told in this story, as well as like the love and romances throughout this, as well as like the family dynamics and the sister dynamics, the mother and daughter dynamics. Very, very, I think, meticulously done in this way that's like the storytelling is so deeply visceral, and it just, I don't know, it's very imaginative and jumps off the page, I think. So, would definitely recommend this, and I think this was one of my honorary mentions, favorites of the year. When I was looking through the books that I read and recorded and logged on Goodreads, I was looking through that and I was like, oh wait, yeah, I read Siren Queen this year, and that was a good-ass book. So, definitely this is on the honorary mentions list. I think it's not making the favorites because it's not something that immediately stood out to me as like something that was as memorable, I think, as other stories, but I think that it is definitely underhyped and deserves more hype. And yeah, if you're looking for a solid lesbian narrative and you fuck with Hollywood stories, pick this up. The next book I want to talk about is Sedating Elaine. This is on the honorary mentions list as well because I don't think it's like the best book. I don't think it's that well done per se, but it was such a interesting glimpse and experience of the interiority of this insane ass person that like was hilarious and terrifying to experience. It's set in London. It's about this girl or this young woman who is in a relationship with this rich young woman named Elaine, but the young woman who's the main character is still caught up on her ex, this beautiful woman who like left her, and it's just like this messy type of lesbian situationship, things moving too fast, like why are we moving in together, we've known each other for like 6 weeks, like type of thing. It becomes like thrust forward by the financial stress that our main character is experiencing, because she like really needs to get the money to pay back her drug dealer, and then she has to pay him more money so that she can get the drugs to sedate Elaine, her girlfriend, and because she like just wants a moment of peace and quiet. And it's just a crazy romp that's about insane human relationships with each other, and all these like crazy ass bisexual girls and their weird fucking relationships with each other, and everyone's like unresolved trauma. Our main character sort of mommy issues and daddy issues, and you know, the things that have weighed on her that make her act the way that she does, essentially. And we see all of this happen. And so no one is very likable, but that's what I really enjoyed about it. And that's what I really fucked with about this story. So I really enjoyed this, and I think it was a really solid read of 2022 for me. Like I had fun, you know? Another lesbian trauma novel that I want to put on my honorary mentions list is Yerba Buena by Nina LaCour. This is a contemporary literary romance following two young women or adult women throughout the course of their lives. They're star-crossed lovers. They meet halfway through the book, so like we see them as separate individuals in their own lives and spheres before we see them like as characters interacting with each other. We see them in previous relationships and stuff. One of them is from sort of the foothills of like Central California before she moves to like the city where the other girl is from. They meet at the restaurant called Yerba Buena that has significance to each of them in different ways, because one of them is a bartender and she comes from a family background that's sort of ravaged by drug abuse and the opioid crisis, and she is thus like distanced from her family, like she ran away from them when she was a teenager, versus our other character who is pretty close with her family but is feeling really stuck in her life and doesn't really know where she wants to go and what direction she wants to move in. And it's just very interesting to see their storylines and their paths coalesce, and the way that their love story sort of emerges from their different places in life, and it feels really real and raw and earnest and true. I think like when I was listening to the audiobook of this through the Libro FM Influencer ALC program, I was totally immersed in this world. They felt like such real characters. I think Nina LaCour is really good at sort of embodying trauma in these queer women characters without sort of making that their identities necessarily. It's just, you know, it informs the way that they move through the world, right? So this was a really solid read this year, one of my favorites, but it's not on the favorites list because I don't know, I don't think it beats out the ones that are like on my favorites list, if that makes sense. So to move on to my favorites of my best of fiction list for 2022, let's just get into it. So the first book I want to talk about is Against the Loveless World by Susan Abelhawa. This book sort of alternates perspective. Well, it's the same character, but it sort of alternates timelines. And in that way, it's somewhat historical fiction. We're basically seeing this Palestinian political prisoner, this woman. She's like in solitary confinement in this Israeli like prison, and in the chapters she sort of recollects the experiences that she had being involved in the Palestinian resistance movement, but also like how she grew up, like her childhood in, I think, Jordan. She was like born in Jordan or something, or like in a refugee camp, and then she moved to like Kuwait with her family. And it's about like her experiences. She was a prostitute. She experienced the invasion from, I think, was it Iran or something? She experienced America's invasion to the Middle East. Like, so she like, is recollecting all of these historic events in like the late 20th century, like the 80s and 90s, all these different wars and stuff that she lived through like as a kid and teenager. And then as she gets older, goes back to Palestine, sees her grandma's home, gets involved with the resistance movement. Like we see all of these stories play out in this heartbreaking way that is so fucking moving, and it's a very feminist narrative, but in a way that's like pretty subversive. It's very much, you know, saying like fuck you to the way that particularly like Muslim women's stories are told, how Palestinians are viewed, the way that like these narratives are framed, because we're getting the perspective of like this one woman from like her prison cell and her whole story. And it was just so moving and beautiful. We see her fall in love and get trapped in different situations, that and how she like survives them and how she figures out how to get through it all. And it's just so fucking moving and beautiful and gorgeously written and rendered and so true. Yeah, I really enjoyed it and it made me cry. So definitely a favorite of the year. Another historical fiction that's very different, but also a favorite of the year, was The Beautiful Ones by Sylvia Morena Garcia. I feel like a lot of people are talking about this year. Was this even released in 2022? Published in 2017, re-released by Tor.com in 2021. So it's interesting that everyone's talking about this now. Because I fucking love this. Like, I think My Name is Marinez talked about this and said that she really enjoyed it. And I think I really enjoyed it for the same reason that she delineated enjoying it, right? Like, it has that Austinian, like, feel, you know, that high society romance banter vibe of, like, this young woman, female main character who is, like, you know, very quirky and smart, but there's like this star-crossed lover situation. There's like a triangle romance, love triangle, what's it called? Yeah. But because it's set in like Regency era France, is it? I don't know. It's, you know, that time period. There's also this element of like magical realism, this like touch of fantasy that is really seamlessly integrated into the world in which our main character, I think her name's Nina. Yeah. Nina is like telekinetic, but among the society called the Beautiful Ones, she has to sort of work around the fact that she is telekinetic, because it's sort of seen as like, oh, that's kind of childish. Like, you to be a beautiful one, like, you kind of have to. But there's this one guy that she really looks up to who is a telekinetic practitioner, and he like goes around touring, doing his shows, being telekinetic, and she runs into him at a party, and she's like, oh my god, like, she wants him to be her mentor so bad, but you know, she also like has a crush on him, of course. But he's actually at that party because he wants to court, or like wants to reconnect with her cousin whom he had a love affair with 10 years ago. And the cousin whom Nina is staying with is like this cold-hearted, you know, calculating woman who is really searching for the best things in life. And we really see all of their perspectives throughout the story and what informs the ways that they approach their lives and navigating the world that they were given and set up with, in like a class society way, in like a gender conscious way, in like a, you know, magical capabilities way. And in that way, it was so interesting and immersive and such a cool experience to be in. And like, I felt so deeply for these characters. I felt like I really got to know all of these characters, and like Nina was so like really, I latched onto her. I was like, she's so real, like I get her, you know. And yeah, I really fuck with this and I really enjoyed it. I know it's like a pretty simplistic story in some ways. It's like not that advanced, you know, but I was like, it's just good. I really enjoyed it, you know? And I get why it's hyped, because I think it's good. Not the fucking sun setting. It's barely 4 p.m. Jesus. Anyways, the next book I want to talk about as a favorite of the year is Made for Love by Alyssa Netting. Alyssa Netting is a new favorite author, 100%. Like, that woman is crazy and a genius, and I need to read everything she will ever write, because this book fucked me the fuck up. Like, I was losing my mind. There's an HBO show called Made for Love adapted from this, and I tried watching it. I couldn't really get through it. I think the book is so fucking good because we get the only perspective we get is of the main female character, who has just at the beginning of the novel like run away from her crazy ass husband, who's essentially like an Elon Musk type figure but actually smart. Like, he's the type of like tech genius giant who has implanted a chip in her brain that allows him to experience everything that she is experiencing like through the eyes of her. And so she is like, Jesus fucking Christ, like, this is fucked up. Or like basically, well, no, he hasn't done that. He like presented this idea to her and was like, this is a new technology I want to push forward with my company. And she was like, huh? The fuck? I don't want to do that. And that was her like last straw, and she ran away. But they had been married for like 5 to 10 years, and she was totally isolated from the rest of her society and the rest of her family. But she kind of came from like a shithole scenario in the first place. So she didn't really feel anything about it, but she also didn't really feel anything towards her husband anyways. Like she just sort of came along for the ride for this whole marriage. So it's like a really complicated toxic dynamic that's really interesting to see, because now at the beginning of the book she's moved back in with her dad, who lives in a trailer park in like Florida or something, and he has just bought a sex doll named Diane, and it's like about this weird dynamic and like the crazy gross things that happen. But then we also get this intercut storyline later about this man who goes viral for saving a dolphin, and then he becomes like sexually attracted to dolphins, and it's like, it's pretty fucked up. Okay, this whole fucking book is so fucked up, but like the way that it talks about technology, surveillance, relationships, family, trauma, gender, like all of these things, I was just like, wow, her fucking mind, you know? Like it's just, it's unreal. It's unreal. Like you can just go there and then you do. Like some writers just go all the way there and it's fucking nuts and crazy, and I'm eating it up the whole time. Like it's so fucking good. I loved it. And like the cover and the side, like this is just so, it's such an amazing book to me. It's crazy, it's wild, it's crazy, but I love it, you know? Anyways, the next book I want to talk about is Fruiting Bodies by Katherine Harlan. I read a lot of short story collections this past year, and I want to talk about so many of them, but I kind of narrowed it down to this one because I think these short stories are some of the ones that have lived in my brain the longest for all of the year so far. And in fact, I even wrote an essay about one of the short stories in here, and I'm thinking about like editing it for the public eye and putting it up on my podcast's Substack and publishing it as an essay. I don't know. Let me know if you would like to read that. But before, that, let me pitch you the book. This book I fucking loved. It's so queer and feminist and weird and speculative. All these things that I fucking adore and love, right? Each of the stories are so... I think all of the stories, some of them worked more for me than other ones. Of course, that's how it is for all short story collections, but I think all of them were constructed in a way that was like very intentional and well done, and the way that magical realism or fantasy or even just like the reality of the world was incorporated into these stories felt really dynamic and sort of and like vibrant and present. Like it's very folklore-esque. It has these stories in it that just lived in my mind forever and probably will forever. One of them, this isn't the story that I wrote about, but one of them is about this lesbian couple that lives in the middle of nowhere in the woods, and one of the women has mushrooms that grows out of her body, and that's why they're super isolated, because the other partner doesn't want her wife to be exposed and become a government sort of experiment. But then things become fucked up when this hiker sort of stumbles into their home and starts taking up residence there. There's the story that I ended up writing about was called Fiddler Fool Pair, and it's about this young woman, this anthropologist, who stumbles across this fairy game, this gambling game under the hill in London, and weird shit goes down, as you could imagine. With the fae involved, weird shit's always going down, It's just it's brilliant. All the stories are just, they're exploring either the intimacy of girlhood, the queerness of girlhood, the actual lesbian relationships, like the way that we even read or interrogate lesbian literature. Like it's so fucking brilliant. You know what I mean? I'm like, maybe people should get MFAs in creative writing, because then you get this. The next book I want to talk about is Schmutz by Felicia Berliner. This book Was so fucking crazy and I loved it. My friend Paris commented on my Goodreads review of this, being like, Sunny, you're so good at finding books for weird girls. And I'm like, literally, like, that's my goal. You know, I love finding a book for weird girls. Like, this book is about this 18-year-old Hasidic girl who is from Brooklyn. She's the only person in her community who goes to secular higher education. She's the only person in her community who like has a laptop for school. She's like studying accounting or something. But because of that, she becomes addicted to internet porn. And so we follow her journey being an Orthodox Jewish girl who is addicted to porn, can't talk to anyone about it except for a therapist that her mom like gets her, sort of inexplicably, but also for the purpose of her being like, okay, you need to become normal within the next year because we have to find you a husband, like you're 18, you know? So it's such an interesting exploration of like this specific community. And like, I think this is the thing that me and my friends have been talking about for like a little bit, is like, I love stories that are so hyper specific, and because they're so hyper specific in its setting and conception, they're so real. Like, it feels real because you know it is so real, and I think this book is totally that. It's absolutely brilliant and hilarious and heartbreaking because we see this girl as she's like trying to navigate all this crazy ass shit, and also like her repressive family dynamic, but also how much she loves like her community and how surrounded and encompassed and held she is by it, and the way that she navigates all of this as she sort of has a foothold in the outside world, like the non-Hasidic world as well as the weird shit that's going on within her own like community and dynamics that she's involved with, and like the financial struggles of like, you know, her large, like she has like what, a bunch of, she has like 5 siblings or something like that, like the struggles of the community at large, like just things like that, you know, be going to college outside of her community and like seeing how other people interact. She befriends some of the goth kids at school, and it was so fucking funny. Like, of course, so much of this is about her exploring her sexual identity and like trying to understand what the fuck is going on. And of course, it's about interrogating like her porn addiction and like what that has to do with her own sense of religious identity and sense of selfhood and womanhood and girlhood. But it's like so much more than that in so many ways, and I really, really fucking enjoyed this. I think it's so memorable and funny and good. So yeah. The next book I want to talk about I don't physically own, and that is called One's Company by Ashley Hudson. I listened to the audiobook on Scribd and it was so fucking crazy. It's another like traumatized woman book, and it's about what it means when you take escapism to its highest form, because essentially this woman is very isolated. Her family, all of her family members have like died, and she wins the lottery, and with this lottery money she builds basically a recreation of the set of her favorite 70s sitcom, and then it's like in an isolated part of somewhere away from everywhere else, and then she individually as herself like sort of cosplays as the characters and lives out those characters' lives and totally immerses herself into those characters' lives. So we see her in the process of creating this world, like all the things that go into it, how she got to that place in the first place, like her background, like her experiences, why she's so isolated, and then also her living in this house as the outside world creeps in and the things that like inevitably occur and happen. And it was so heartbreaking and funny and thought-provoking. And I think it has a lot to say about the nature of like immersing yourself into fantasy worlds, like escapism, like what it means to be so lonely and to be hurt and to feel lonely, how we push other people away when we need them the most. Like, but it was brilliant, I think, and I had such a good time. Well, it was sad. I had a sad good time reading it, you know. It's like when you listen to like sad music and you're like, oh, this is so good, but like I'm so sad. It's like that's what it was like to read it, to be honest. But yeah, I really fucked with it. Another book I really fucked with was Counterfeit by Kristen Chen. But I talk more about this book in a video with my best friend Renaissance, who also I co-host the podcast with, and in a recommendation video where I recommend them books that I've been meaning to recommend them but haven't had the chance to, because on our podcast one of the segments is recommending each other media. and like it just hasn't come up. So Counterfeit by Kristen Chen. It plays with form and perspective so interestingly, but just watch that video and that section of that video to hear my pitch for that. Oh yeah, and one feel-good book, because I think a lot of these books are kind of sad and cerebral, but like one sort of like commercial fiction, feel-good, sweet lesbian book is Iona Iverson's Rules for Commuting by Claire Pooley. So cute, so fun, about an old woman, this old dyke who writes an advice column and like starts mooching off of the train passengers for advice about like what to contribute to the magazine, because like everyone at the magazine is like, oh, you're too old to work here. And then everyone on the train that on the tube, because it's in London, they go together to work on, they start all becoming friends and getting involved with each other in their lives despite being British. So yeah, and like we see all of these different people as they start, you know, opening up and solving problems to their lives with each other's help. And it's very sweet and wholesome and feels kind of similar to like Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine, or Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead by Emily Austen, which is one of my favorite books of all time. So this is definitely, I think, could be considered one of my favorites of the year as well. So that is all of my favorite fiction books of the year-ish, kind of. I'm sure there are a lot of books that I really enjoyed this past year that I haven't mentioned. These are just the books that I like. I looked at my shelf and I was like, my physical shelf and my Goodreads shelf, and I was like, I should mention these. But anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I really hope that you comment down below what books of these that you have read and what your thoughts on them were, whether you liked them, whether they were favorites of yours as well or not, or if you'd be willing to read any of them, and if you would like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. And yeah, you can check me out on my social media and everything else down below. But I'll see you in my next video, hopefully. So bye!